Imitation. It could be everywhere, at every corner you turn and at any place you look. Imitation is especially everywhere in the current digital world we live in, with the rampant use of artificial intelligence being as annoying as ever. Man, I swear I can't get on anything without some pop-up for AI hassling me. With this in mind, it reminded me of a certain trope that the Ultraman series tends to bring up, that being the classic battle of an Ultraman against an imitation Ultraman. Now sure, I may just be a lowly wanderer going through the stars with the enthusiasm to talk about the franchises I love that give me passion by using footage to highlight my points here on YouTube, but I only make videos when I have ideas I just have to share, such as today's video. It can be terrifying, not knowing when someone's gonna use your likeness to do dastardly things, and if the way technology is going, it certainly feels like many of the alien Seijin foes that Ultraman battles can pop up at any moment and at any time. That's why I'm making this video, since I believe we can find some sort of solution on how to battle imitation, and that means by staying true to yourself. Just look at how the mini battles against copycats end up. More often than not, it is because Ultraman's altruism and sense of justice prevails over all the fake Ultras he battles. So sit back, relax, and join me as I do an analysis over the many different interpretations of the concept of imitation Ultras throughout the Ultraman series. The first appearance of this concept was in the original Ultraman series. In episode 18, we get introduced to the alien Zerub, who proposes that humanity is the so-called little brother to his race and only exists to be mind-controlled by him through hypnosis. Now, Zerub's fascinating, as he knew that both Ultraman and the SSSP were in his way, thus he devised schemes in order to fool them. Now, said schemes boil down to commandeering one of mankind's rockets from Saturn, raining radioactive fog onto Tokyo, creating a communication device out of a radio, wish I could do that, and lastly, he kidnapped Shin Hayata. It's especially interesting as Zerub was one of the earliest Seijin foes in the franchise, and not only that, but he arrived on Earth with the knowledge that Hayata was Ultraman's host. Throughout the Ultraman mythos, you'll notice how a bunch of these aliens arrive knowing that the protagonist is Ultraman, which makes it more enthralling as we don't know what they're going to do with that information. This Zerub fella may not have the visually satisfying powers as Baltan or the sheer weirdness of Dada, but what he does have in his favor is deluding others. Sure, many of Ultraman's alien foes usually cause bizarre circumstances to happen in everyday life, yet Zerub leaves a mark as he was the first one to create a vile fake Ultraman. If you just look at his design, you know something's off about this other Ultraman. And he even has those evil looking eyes, which I think is a nice touch. Things play out in the original 66 series pretty much the same as seen in 2022's Shin Ultraman. And both of these instances, Zerub impersonates Ultraman prior to the climactic battle, and tries to tarnish his image by causing destruction. Likewise, the actual fight occurs during a city at nightfall, as Ultraman saves one of his friends from the clutches of the imitator, and then a quick, snappy, and answer-clearing duel carries on. It becomes clear to everyone watching who the real Ultraman is as Zerub reveals himself, and then the Giant of Light is able to finish him off. I especially like how the original episode ends with the cast exclaiming how the real Ultraman would never hurt humanity, as the closing shot is our Ultraman himself as he flies towards the camera. It's super sweet, and it's just a great way to close the episode on Ultraman himself. It ties into how people will eventually realize who the real Ultraman was all along. That same guy we all know will save the day, even against maddening doppelgangers. And speaking of doppelgangers, if you ever seen C-Lab 2021, then you know that you gotta deal with doppelgangers head on. One subtle detail I like about this Zerub episode, this plot, was how it's implied that Hoshino knew Hayata was Ultraman, hence why he brought him the beta capsule. The idea of kids knowing who the real Ultraman is ties into the next entry on the list. Let's fast forward a little bit to the 1990s, where in episode 31 of Ultraman Dyna, we got a new interpretation of the Imitation concept. This time, things are not as maleficent, and instead boil down to a battle between martial arts and the pride of fighters. Alien and Gregor arrives on Earth with the goal to become the strongest in the galaxy by besting Dyna in a one-on-one match and a sparring ring, even if it means he has to keep taunting Dyna to finally get his fight. Before that, however, we get a goofy, charming scene where Asuka is just enjoying some kind of sandwich and drink during his patrol. I don't even think he was on his lunch break, I think he was just hungry. We zoom out into the perspective of a camera as a kid named Kudo Natsumi takes pictures of Mr. Chuckles over here on lunch break. It turns out that while Natsumi is wanting to be a photographer when she grows up, and bugs Asuka for a while, until the kaiju Mons Agar seemingly returns and creates havoc. Now, I'm a pretty big Mons Agar fan myself, so shout out to him. I like this moment where Asuka looks over his shoulder once again before trying the Henshin and the Dyna. Makes his encounter with Natsumi moments ago even funnier, especially since he was taking pictures. Who knows if she could have taken a picture of him becoming Dyna. Ties in the whole theme of trying to keep your identity safe. Before he can activate the live flasher, however, somehow another Dyna appears and takes care of Mons Agar, although he fights far differently than the Dyna we know. This other guy fights with too much pride and unnecessary style, does a lot of showboating, and does a horrific finisher on the monster, which Natsumi remarks about as she takes pictures. So her little encounter with Asuka earlier pays off as she becomes another witness and helps encourage Asuka to keep fighting. Here we get another example of a kid showing and knowing something is amiss even when adults don't, and it pays off later. I just like that Natsumi helps Asuka and therefore Dyna realize the importance of continuing the fight against all odds. It shows that all the earlier episodes of Dyna's actions, his heroism, has paid off on everyday people. I love it. Additionally, the real Dyna knows the value of relying on others, which serves as additional strength that can help him when he needs it most, as we see later on in the climactic fight between Dyna and his imitator. It's an episode that seems to fly by since the final fight begins around the halfway point. The beauty of tokusatsu is this: the fights we see may be special effects, yet fights are a fantastically engaging way to enjoy, well, fantasy storytelling. It's the same thing that happens in martial arts films. The fights are important for the story. I love that tokusatsu allows suit actors to emote in ways that are creative and universal, while at the same time being something that is actually in front of us. If there's one thing to take away from this video, it's that storytellers should never discredit the distinct storytelling ability that fights bring. Just look at Gennady Tarkovsky's work. The same idea applies to tokusatsu. And when it comes to our titular Ultramen battling their devious doppelgangers, the cadence of the fights helps sell the story. We see that Alien Gregor's Imitation is boastful and doesn't have any problems with relaying a relentless beatdown on his foes, as we saw with Mons Agar earlier. It's also that Gregor has no problem attacking humans that were cheering on the real Dyna. He really doesn't have a code. Compare that to the real Dyna who has to earn his victories and would never stoop down to something so low. With this in mind, this particular idea pays off in the ending where Gregor begins to see that Dyna's true strength was not merely his own, for it was the strength of everyone that believed in him that gave him the power to keep going. And Gregor wasn't the only one that learned something, as Dyna and Asuka were able to prevail and reconsider their own determination. Asuka is one of my favorite Ultra hosts. I love how his series shows him learning to overcome his own uneasy feelings that lie beneath his goofy, lighthearted nature. Even if a foe is more overpowering and confident in their abilities, you can still unlock that passionate determination you know you have deep down. That signature Dyna fighting spirit. A similar event happens in Dyna's movie that occurs during his series. I really like the duel with Gregor because it ends up without a casualty. That paired with the classic Battle at Sunset backdrop makes this fight one I'd love to revisit. And I'm also a fan of Gregor's episode and character in 2022's Ultraman Decker. Whenever Decker revisited ideas and old faces from Dyna, it usually paid off greatly. And it was especially fun there since Gregor's human form was played by Koji Nakamura, who was a major and prominent suit actor during the Tiga Dyna Gaia trilogy. Cool homages like that always bring a smile to an old pirate like myself. While the Gregor we see here never imitated Decker, I actually like that the episode instead gave the spotlight to the alien himself. Shows that the concept of alien Gregor and the thrill of a worthy battle can extend beyond imitation. The imitation design for Dyna, let's go back to Dyna, is incredible. His primary design is an evil-fied Miracle Type 1, with sharp black lines combined with the gold and Miracle Blue. It makes a solid contrast to the Dyna we know. Plus, the imitation has those evil elf shoes like Zerub's fake Ultra form. It's a nice touch. And speaking of uniquely contrasting bad guy designs and possible redemption, let's talk about Evil Tiga. Before Ultraman Dyna, there was Ultraman Tiga, and I'm sure you've heard about him. He's a pretty popular guy. I wanted to talk about Tiga after Dyna though, on purpose, because I feel like this version of the concept seems to still pop up more often in this franchise. By that I mean the idea of a fully sentient evil Ultra copy that isn't an alien. Rather, sometimes this is the case of a human being the antagonist and summoning their own dark counterpart. I've seen in Ultraman Tiga, where CEO and physicist named Kaigo Misaki stole Daigo's Spark Lance, and became Evil Tiga. This story takes place in a two-parter across episodes 43 and 44. This Misaki guy had a superiority complex and believed he was destined to rise above other humans, going as far as believing he was a messiah of sorts. Well, the kind of messiah that only seeks to control others with his own lust for power. He partnered with TBC scientist Yuji Tango, and used data on Daigo's inheritance of light to develop his plan to become his own Giant of Light. Episode 43 is about Geoshark and developing Masaki's supervillain scheme, where he steals a spark lance from an exhausted Daigo at a carnival. He even would later boast about how him and Daigo share similar DNA. It's interesting that around this time in Tiga we get to see more of Daigo, having to contend with antagonistic humans, such as earlier in episode 39 with Akio Kurita. Now the storyline of Masaki is fascinating since it gives us an insight into how the concept of Ultraman is perceived by others, and that can always vary. There's a little bit about how that scientist guy, Tango, betrayed the TPC and stole the statue remains, that dust, because he felt underutilized and neglected for his quote-unquote superior intelligence. Therefore, he partnered with Masaki. Having these two guys being power-hungry because they believe Ultraman only represents power shows how the beautiful simplicity of Ultraman, being the kind stranger who steps in to help others, can't be misconstrued by people who think they're smarter than they are. It could be a terrifying thought since our real world is full of people in charge who think they're smarter than they are. And that hubris can lead to sad consequences for everyone else, such as the scene where Masaki corrupts the giant into Evil Tiga and starts destroying the city. It's madness. It's upsetting to see a twisted Ultra figure begin attacking a city. And this already sets him up as a more antagonistic threat like Zerub more than a Gregor. Notably, Evil Tiga's design has what I'd call a icky or vile color scheme, rather than just being, say, an evil Ultra with red eyes and a black and silver color scheme. Instead, he's got these sorta cyan and sorta light blue eyes that they really capture your eyes, your attention, and a reddish-orange chest piece and limb braces outlined by a hazy gold. Then he's got the black outlines filling out other parts of the classic silver body, making his color scheme very distinct while still being recognizable as a wicked inverse of the Tiga we know. And then, Evil Tiga's body language matches up with what we saw with Masaki in the previous episode at the carnival, but now heightened and exaggerated. he fights Guts and tragically slays his loyal buddy Gardy. Oh man, it's a hard scene to watch unfold as Gardy desperately tries to get through to his old buddy, but it just doesn't end well. We don't often see a villainous human corrupt an Ultra, and it makes you wonder what evil Tiga may have looked like in the past. Luckily, the real Tiga is able to confront and defeat his evil imitator, while also laying Gardy's body to rest. Although, it looks like Gardy may have lived, since his dog host runs past the camera during the end montage. Good boy. As for Masaki himself, he returns in the finale to help Guts revive Tiga and Daigo. It's nice. The fact that he gets some kind of redemption shows how the series has evolved with their antagonists. It also ties into one of Tiga's core themes of being able to find the light and get another chance, even if it seems like an overwhelming mountain to climb. I mentioned the episode earlier about Makino Kurino, and the same theme applies here. Plus, we see a similar sentiment in episode 45, with the gigantic dream pollen flower monster, Gaijira. Both of these episodes end with a human or alien antagonist coming to the revelation that Ultraman means more than they had additionally understood. While the exact endings and fates differ for these opposing guys, I always find it heartwarming when characters can genuinely discover something they never saw before. And when you have the evil Tiga story between these other stories I mentioned, they all come together into a nice, cohesive theme about the importance of Ultraman Tiga himself, and Daigo's own determination to make the right decision of being the friend that humanity needs. So I've talked about Zerub, Gregor, and Masaki's evil Tiga, and how they all manifest different interpretations of the Imitation Ultra concept. It's refreshing and makes the concept ripe for new takes. Evil Tiga set the stage for a new version of a bad guy Ultra, and funny enough, he wouldn't be the only one for Tiga, as there was Chimera and Tiga's own dark forms. The Ultraman series as a whole would revisit Tiga's dark designs and create dark forms for several Ultras in the future, especially in the 3rd generation. Heck, even further, to this day, in the 4th generation, we're getting the new Ultraman Arc film where he fights a dark Arc counterpart. It's kind of funny since just a few years ago we got a film with Ultraman Trigger's film where he fights Evil Trigger, so Evil Tiga kind of lived on in that way. However, that's a story for another time. As for the purpose of this video, I just want to talk about a different kind of Imitation Ultra next, that being robots. Robots. These guys are built different, quite literally. Sometimes just want to see Ultraman fight robots, and there's been a bunch of imitators being robots before. The first was when Ultra 7 fought a robot counterpart, in episode 46 where he was created by Alien Salome. Then, in Ultraman Ace's show we got a robot ace in episode 14. This robot ace was created by the ever-hater of peace that is Yapul, as a testing subject for their far superior Ace Killer. Perhaps Ace Killer himself could be considered an Imitation Ultra. I'll have to ponder that idea more. Anyway, there was a Terranoid in Ultraman Dyna that got corrupted by the spears, and once again showed how some humans are power hungry for Ultraman's power, but not his heart. With this Terranoid from Dyna in mind, there's another example of a robot Ultra trying to impersonate the real thing. That's the first part of Ultraman Z's final boss, where Ultroid Zero was made to be the ultimate weapon, but was also corrupted into a new super monster. For all the multiverses there are, it seems that some greedy humans just can't get it through their skulls. Luckily, these robotic Ultras show that you just can't beat the real guy. It's another way of showing how different these impersonating Ultras can be, but ultimately fall short of the real Ultras we know and love. And in the age of weird technology that's coming about, I certainly hope I do not have to fight a robotic doppelganger of myself. But if I do, there's plenty of Ultramen that give me ideas on how to come out on top. Shwatch! There were other robotic ultras I could have mentioned, and other types of impersonating aliens seen throughout the many corners of this franchise. For instance, Alien Barbaru from Ultraman Leo is another dastardly invader that impersonated as a fake Astra. Then if you look at Ultraman Nexus, most of his major villains are dark counterparts, so perhaps it could still extend there. But I think that ties more into a different type of villain, said type of villain being the big guy in the room named Ultraman Belial, who certainly made a name for himself as a distinct character. No matter what though, whether it's an imitation or evil counterpart, these villains are no match for the real Ultra heroes when the time comes to see who is real. And if by some chance this happens to you, make sure you handle it like any Ultraman would. Would you look at that, my color timer's going off. Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Tiger Drop Films. Feel free to let me know what characters I didn't mention in the comments below and why you like them. Until next time, remember to enjoy the small things in life, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.